One of the primary themes of the beginning of the Torah is that of accepting responsibility or failing to do that. For example, in the story of Adam and Eve with eating at the tree, Adam blames Eve blames the snake when they're confronted with their mistake. And then in the latter part of the portion, when Cain kills Abel, God asks him where Abel is, and he pretends he doesn't know, and then he says, "Am I my brother's keeper?" Now we contrast that with the story of King David, when King David sinned with committing adultery with Bathsheba and having Uriah the Hittite, her husband, killed. The prophet Nathan comes to talk to him and tries to, using a metaphor, explain David's sin. And the Bible relates that he says, well, there was a fellow who had one sheep and another fellow had a lot of sheep. Somebody came for dinner, and the fellow with a lot of sheep took the one guy's sheep instead of taking one from his own flock. And David said, whoever does this thing should die. And then Nathan said, well, you're the guy. And David said, yes, it's my sin. He owned up to it. I think about this today in the context of three stories that are in the news this week. The first was the Chicago Tribune, a study which said that half the people claim medals for military valor that they didn't earn. And when confronted with it, they had several excuses. One said, well, the mission was so top secret classified that of course there's no evidence about it. Second, blamed it on editing from Who's Who, and another kind of excuse involving somebody else who made a mistake in putting on their record. Bad editing. And then you have the story from a U.S. senator who was just convicted by a jury of several crimes having to do with accepting money for renovations from his house from a supporter, and they're not claiming it. And apparently, during one phase of the trial, he blamed his wife, since she was in charge of the whole project, but he didn't know anything about it, even though evidently there was evidence on the tape that had him saying we could go to jail for this. And then you have this very mysterious case about a basketball coach who used to be a great NBA star and a college star, who evidently took an overdose. Sadly, he's had a lot of problems. Reportedly took an overdose of medicine, and then when confronted with it, said no, that was his daughter who did it. We have all these examples of people failing to take responsibility when they should. And so I think one of the great messages coming out of the Torah that rings loudly in our ears in Western civilization is the trying to pass the hat, or pass the buck, for the sin of the eating of the tree when God forbade it, failing to accept responsibility for the killing of Abel, contrasting that with King David, who when confronted with his sin said, yes, I did it. And so it's really about being a man, being a woman, accepting responsibility. As Albert Einstein once said, try not to become a man of success, but rather become a man of value. And a man of value would accept responsibility. That's really what we do on Yom Kippur, acknowledging our transgressions and then trying to get a clean start.